My dear young lady, there comes a time in every soldier's life when he must stand or fall alone. And if you knew the Army, you'd understand that he who hesitates...
He was Hollywood royalty, the face of every daring pirate and roguish hero on the silver screen. But behind the flashing grin and perfectly tailored costumes, Errol Flynn was hiding a life so chaotic, so dark, that even his fans didn't know what to believe. They called him the king of swashbucklers. But what if the real Errol Flynn wasn't just a bad boy? What if he was something far worse? From devilish charm to a dangerous childhood. Long before Hollywood came calling, Flynn was already crafting his legend. Raised in Tasmania, he didn't just rebel, he raged against authority. At just 7 years old, he ran away from home to avoid punishment for playing doctor with a neighborhood girl. His parents were both intelligent, but emotionally distant, his father a respected biologist, and his mother a strict, aloof woman with little patience for her son's antics. Flynn wasn't just misbehaving, he was an emotional hurricane from a young age. His teachers couldn't control him, and by the time he hit his teenage years, he was already immersed in the criminal underbelly of Hobart. At 17, Flynn was expelled from school for his involvement with an Australian gang, something he didn't regret in the slightest. He was proud of his defiance. His behavior became so infamous within his family that his own mother referred to him as a devil in boys' clothing. That stinging label stuck with him, almost like a badge of honor. It wasn't just the actions. Flynn seemed to relish being the villain. Whether it was bravado or a deep need for attention, Errol Flynn was already writing his own legend before he ever saw a camera. Flynn would later feed the myth himself, claiming in his memoirs that he'd been a slave trader, a gold prospector, even a killer who escaped a jungle ambush by shooting a man in the neck. True? Maybe. But Flynn didn't care. He wanted people talking. His autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, reads more like a pulp novel than a truthful account. But in the mind of Errol Flynn, exaggeration was part of the performance. What made this early chapter in Flynn's life so captivating was that he blurred the line between truth and fiction with masterful ease. His stories, no matter how outlandish, were delivered with such charm and confidence that people believed him, or wanted to. Whether they were horrified or enthralled, they couldn't look away. It was a pattern that would follow him throughout his life, as Flynn continued to walk the fine line between fame and infamy, hero and scoundrel. His life wasn't just a story, it was a performance, and the world was watching. Fame built on lies and luck. Flynn's acting career didn't begin in Hollywood. It started in the unlikeliest of places, the remote jungles of New Guinea. While captaining a boat on the Sepik River, Flynn stumbled into his first role when a film crew cast him in a local production. With his tall frame, athletic build, and smoldering looks, he looked the part of a dashing adventurer even before he became one on screen. The film, In the Wake of the Bounty, wasn't a hit, but it planted the seed. Flynn wanted fame, and he wasn't about to wait around for it. He started manipulating the truth to get what he wanted. Once in England, he talked his way into a British theater company by presenting them with a completely fabricated resume. He listed fake acting credits and even pretended to be a well-known Australian star. His confidence was bulletproof, and his lies worked. Before long, he was cast in a Warner Brothers murder mystery film being shot in London. That opportunity was the golden ticket. The studio saw something in Flynn, raw charm, danger, and undeniable charisma. They flew him to Hollywood, where he quickly became a star. But his rise was built on deception, and that deception followed him like a shadow. Flynn's talent on screen was real, but the foundation of his career was fiction. This paradox, being both genuinely gifted and blatantly dishonest, became one of the most intriguing elements of his persona. People couldn't decide if he was a genius or a fraud, a legend or a lie. Hollywood, always eager for a good story, embraced him with open arms. But behind the scenes, executives whispered about his volatile behavior, his arrogance, and his unquenchable appetite for chaos. As his fame grew, so did the rumors. and Flynn did nothing to stop them. In fact, he seemed to enjoy fanning the flames. A marriage that belonged in a war film. On a steamship bound for New York in 1934, Errol Flynn met French film star Lily Damita. Their first meeting was anything but romantic. When Flynn asked her to dance, she reportedly brushed him off coldly. But once they reconnected in Hollywood, their attraction turned fiery fast. Within months, they were married. Unfortunately, their passion burned both ways. The relationship quickly devolved into screaming matches, broken furniture, and bruises. The press dubbed them the Battlin' Flynns, and it wasn't hyperbole. Flynn often showed up to set with black eyes or scratches, claiming he'd run into a door or been in a minor accident. Insiders knew better. According to several friends, Lily threw things when she was angry. Glasses, vases, even fists. The studio couldn't afford a scandal involving their prized action star, so they spun damage control like clockwork. After one particularly brutal fight that landed both Flynn and Damita in the hospital, Warner Brothers insisted it was the result of a car accident. Flynn, they claimed, had swerved to avoid hitting a cat. The lie worked. The audience kept cheering, but behind the scenes, the marriage was unraveling. Party mansion or Hollywood haunted house? Flynn's Mulholland Drive mansion was infamous, a palatial estate part party house, part fun house, and part den of secrets. The rooms featured secret tunnels, two-way mirrors, and hidden peepholes meant for spying. Guests never quite knew who was watching or what they might walk into. The house became a hub for Hollywood's wildest parties. Alcohol flowed freely, and so did the rumors. According to Flynn, women lined up at his door night and day, so desperate to meet him, he joked that he needed a baseball bat to keep them away. It might have been a joke, or it might have been the truth. The parties were so packed that Flynn sometimes had to push his way through crowds just to get to his own front door. Celebrities, strangers, aspiring starlets, all mingled in the whirlwind of excess. The mansion was a nonstop fever dream of ego, desire, and escape. But underneath the glamour, there was an unmistakable sense of decay. Flynn wasn't just entertaining, he was hiding. The trial that should have destroyed him. In 1942, the law finally caught up with Errol Flynn. A 17-year-old girl named Betty Hansen accused him of statutory assault. Flynn, ever confident, spoke with the police without a lawyer present, a decision that backfired almost immediately. The investigation led to a second accusation, this time from Peggy Satterley, who was only 15. Flynn didn't deny being with Peggy. In fact, he admitted she'd been on his yacht. But he claimed she had shown him a license saying she was 21. Whether he believed that or not remains unclear. What is clear is that Flynn walked into the biggest media circus of his life. The trial was front-page news. Courtrooms were packed. Gossip columns exploded. It was one of Hollywood's first major sex scandals. But rather than destroy Flynn, it made him more famous. His female fan base grew. In Like Flynn became the new catchphrase, a reference to his supposed ease with women. He became a sex symbol fueled by a criminal trial. Even more disturbing? While the trial was still ongoing, Flynn began flirting with an 18-year-old courthouse worker named Nora Eddington. She sold cigarettes in the lobby. By the time the trial ended, she would become his second wife. Addicted, broken, and still acting. By the mid-1940s, the cracks in Errol Flynn's glamorous image were starting to show, and fast. Years of heavy drinking had already taken a toll on his body and mind, but after the trial and media circus, he spiraled into deeper self-destruction. He wasn't just drinking anymore, he was injecting so-called vitamin shots laced with morphine, taking barbiturates to sleep, and using heroin to numb himself. It was a toxic cocktail that turned a vibrant star into a man running from his own demons. Flynn became known for sneaking alcohol onto film sets by injecting vodka into oranges and casually eating them between takes. To his fans, he was still the daring Robin Hood, but to his co-stars and directors, he was increasingly unreliable, moody, and volatile. Productions often fell behind schedule because of his erratic behavior. Crew members had to adjust entire filming routines around his unpredictable outbursts, hangovers, or sudden disappearances. His marriage to Nora Eddington, once seen as a chance at redemption, began to collapse under the weight of his addictions. Nora would later reveal how powerless she felt watching the man she once admired dissolve into addiction. Flynn insisted he could stop whenever he wanted, but he never did. He justified his habits as necessary escapes from the pressures of fame, yet they were destroying everything he had built. Financially, things were becoming dire. Flynn had lived as though the money would never stop flowing: lavish vacations, extravagant parties, gambling, and debts he refused to acknowledge. But the offers were drying up. Directors were wary. Studios were tired of cleaning up his messes. The once glorious swashbuckler was now considered a liability in Hollywood, and yet, even at rock bottom, Flynn could still turn on the charm. He managed to land roles here and there, mostly playing versions of himself, men who were aging, broken, and drowning in regret. The lines between his characters and his real life were disappearing. It was tragic, but it was also hauntingly poetic. Flynn was no longer playing a role. He was the role, the Nazi spy allegations. In 1980, more than 2 decades after Errol Flynn's death, a bombshell rocked Hollywood history. Biographer Charles Hyam published a controversial book that alleged Flynn had been more than just a womanizing movie star. He had been a Nazi spy. The accusation sent shockwaves through the industry. How could one of America's most iconic action heroes possibly have been working with the enemy during World War II? Hyam's theory wasn't based on direct evidence, but on a troubling web of associations, circumstantial clues, and whispered confessions. Central to his claims was Flynn's long-standing friendship with Dr. Hermann F. Urban, an Austrian physician whom Flynn had met during his pre-fame adventures in New Guinea. Urban was confirmed to be a member of the Nazi Party and reportedly had ties to German intelligence, although he denied ever engaging in espionage. The closeness between Flynn and Urban, who traveled extensively together and maintained a long correspondence, raised eyebrows. Adding fuel to the fire was Flynn's association with Freddie McAvoy, an Australian socialite and Olympic athlete known for his lavish parties and deeply anti-Semitic views. McAvoy was another close confidant of Flynn's, and his vocal admiration for Nazi ideology did little to help Flynn's posthumous reputation. Hyam even claimed that a woman whose husband had worked closely with Flynn recounted how the actor had once drunkenly admitted to supporting the Nazis and possibly aiding their efforts. These weren't small claims. If true, they would turn one of Hollywood's golden idols into a villain of international proportions. Yet, despite the scandalous headlines and public outcry, Hyam's assertions have never been conclusively proven. Many historians and journalists have since dismissed the allegations, citing a lack of hard evidence and pointing to Hyam's reputation for sensationalism. The FBI reportedly investigated Flynn during the war and found no proof of disloyalty. Still, the damage was done. The mere suggestion that Errol Flynn may have sympathized with or even aided Nazi Germany cast a long shadow over his already complicated legacy. Even if he was never an official spy, his choice of companions and his apathy toward political matters during the war made it easy for suspicions to fester. In the court of public opinion, sometimes association alone is enough to stain a reputation forever. For Flynn, who had once symbolized righteous rebellion and on-screen heroism, the idea that he might have betrayed those ideals in real life added a layer of darkness to an already tarnished myth. The truth remains elusive, but the questions still linger. What did Flynn know? And more importantly, what was he hiding? The final fall. By the late 1950s, Flynn was a ghost of himself. His physical health was deteriorating. Decades of drinking and STDs, malaria, and tuberculosis had left him frail. He tried to make a comeback by co-financing his own film, but the production collapsed. The money was gone. The roles were gone. The studio system had moved on without him. Ironically, his final performances were some of his best. In The Sun Also Rises, Flynn played a bitter, broken, alcoholic war veteran. He wasn't acting. Critics praised his emotional depth. Warner Brothers cast him again as his old friend John Barrymore in Too Much, Too Soon. Flynn poured everything into the role: grief, memory, regret. It was his last major film. In 1959, Flynn died suddenly in Vancouver at just 50 years old. Officially, the cause was a massive heart attack, but his body told another story: years of damage, decades of excess. Rumor has it he was buried with 6 bottles of his favorite whiskey, because Errol Flynn wasn't just a man, he was a myth. And like all myths, the truth was never simple.